Support for Digging Deeper comes from the Penn State Alumni Association, connecting alumni to the university and to each other. The Alumni Association is powered by pride. Learn more at alumni.psu.edu. And from viewers like you, thank you.
Hi, I'm Robert Johnson. Technology is constantly changing the way we live, work, and play. It's also changing the way we learn. Public schools in the United States spend more than $3 billion a year on digital content. At Penn State, a group of educators gather once a year to ask tough questions and pitch big ideas that could help revolutionize the learning experience. In this episode of Digging Deeper, Penn State President Barron discusses teaching and learning with technology with Ann Clements, Associate Professor and Graduate Program Chair for Music Education, Scott McDonald, Associate Professor of Education, and Jennifer Sparrow, the Senior Director of Teaching and Learning with Technology at Penn State.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I just love thinking about how technology is going to change education and change students' lives. And I know we're 48 hours away from the Teaching and Learning with Technology Symposium. I got to go to it one time. I was amazed at how many people were in the room. What goes on at this symposium, Jennifer?
So thanks for asking that question. We have about between 500 and 600 faculty, staff, and students who come together on a Saturday, which is pretty incredible if you think about them giving up their Saturday to be here. And they really showcase the best of what's happening in teaching and learning with technology at Penn State. So it's a gathering. We often have a great keynote speaker. We often get dignitaries in for lunch, like we had you in there for lunch. We'll spend the day talking about what's working, what's on the horizon. Throughout the lunch period, we talk about an Open Innovation Challenge, which is an opportunity for a small number of faculty to get up and give this pitch about their idea of what they should be working on that's really emerging. And they may or may not have the resources to start working on that. It's really interesting because they're often very forward-thinking. And the audience gets to vote. So these are 5-minute pitches. It goes very, very quickly. And the audience votes, and the winner of that gets a full set of resources to support the development of their project over the next 8 to 12 months, which is really exciting.
Does it surprise you that so many people, I think the thing that surprised me the most when I walked in was so many people spending their Saturday involved, either pitching or inviting.
Listening. I was surprised when I came to Penn State at the turnout of this, but this is my 4th symposium where I've been here in person. And the excitement and the enthusiasm and the sharing that goes on between the faculty is pretty incredible. And we've seen presentations from students and how they're leveraging technology, and those are really fascinating to see how it integrates with the vision that faculty have as well for where we need to be heading. I once heard this called the single most impactful professional development day of the year. And nothing makes me more proud to think that's a part of what we're able to provide for our faculty and staff here.
That's just a fantastic description. It just tells you how eager the faculty are to innovate and to take advantage of all those things that are going. So describe how the challenge itself works. Hundreds of entries, 10 entries?
Less than 10, or sorry, more than 10, less than 100 entries. And faculty, there's a call ahead of time. So the call goes before a group of folks within teaching and learning with technology. And so we look for some things that are really cutting edge, things that are innovative, maybe some ideas that we know are on the horizon in terms of what's next for the technologies. But we are very much focused on the teaching and learning piece of this. So it isn't just we're going to bring a particular technology in, but this is how it's going to impact teaching, learning, or research at the institution. And those are carved down to a far smaller number. So I think we have 6 finalists in the Open Innovation Challenge this year. Each person gets 5 minutes to present, and we're relentless or ruthless about the 5 minutes. So when it gets down to the last 10 seconds, the audience starts to clap, and they clap more quickly and more loudly as we get to 0, and we do a hard cutoff.
But everybody smiles, even when they're cut off.
Even when they're cut off, yes. And it's interesting because the first folks that go typically make it all the way to 0, and then you'll see that like the third or fourth faculty member that goes, they're done before the timer goes.
They don't want the clap.
Yeah. And this year, for the first time ever, we actually have a student who has pitched an idea. So that'll be included in the Open Innovation Challenge.
Fantastic.
So he has an idea. So it'll be great to see how the voting goes afterwards. So as soon as that's completed, we open the voting up. People vote digitally. And at the end of the day, we announce the winner. And so there's this immediate understanding of what the focus is going to be for the next year. But I think the bigger thing that comes out of this is really an understanding of a very broad set of truly innovative ideas that faculty come to the table with. And even if someone isn't officially the winner, there are often times for us to think about how do we start to grow these projects, what conversations do these feed for the rest of the calendar year, so how do we start to think about augmented reality, for example. What are the kinds of conversations we need to be having more broadly at the institution in order to support the kinds of things that faculty are thinking about?
Well, I will tell you, I had a favorite in the pitches that I heard, and I left going, who won? Who won? When will I get to know who won? So, Anne, you were a winner.
Oh.
And so, tell me, first of all, what it's like to stand up in front of all your peers and take one of your ideas that you really feel strongly about and give that pitch to everybody and
It's like Shark Tank on television. You have 5 minutes to pitch your idea.
Technology and Learning Shark Tank at Penn State.
That's right. Yeah. It's a joy, though. It's a pleasure to be there. It's exciting to be part of the smaller group that's invited up on stage to share the idea. It's great that you might have something really out of the box. And then here's Teaching and Learning with Technology saying, we want to hear it. We want to put you on stage and have your colleagues hear it. So it's a great honor. And to get to that stage in the competition, you really have to have passion in your own idea. And so it was exciting to be on stage.
So what was your idea?
My idea was, can we use artificial intelligence, machine learning, and virtual or augmented reality to improve pre-service teacher education? It's a challenge in my field, which is music education, to get undergraduate students out into live teaching situations in the local community from the very beginning of the time that they're here. Junior, senior year, we can get them out. Freshman, sophomore, it's a lot harder to do. So what can we do through technology to supplement the live teaching experiences that they're going to have?
So augmented reality, people are putting on a headset and they have a classroom in front of them, but it's not real?
Correct. That's correct. Yes, we have little digital beings that have very distinct and individualized personalities and particular characteristics that choose to respond and engage or choose not to. It's very much like a regular classroom in K-12. Yep, and it's an opportunity for the students to practice things like proximity and eye contact and calling students by name and some of the very basic level teaching skills.
So they can walk around their students and...
That's correct.
And how are you gauging whether there's eye contact with this virtual classroom?
Interesting that you ask that. It's built in. It's built into the program. Your ability to move forward and closer to the students will gain more attention from them, and they'll look up at you more. The more distant you are, if they can't see you, if there's no line of sight, then they'll put their heads down or kind of look out the window and become...
So if you sit down at your desk and just talk like this at everybody...
That's right.
Everybody just...
You will have what happens in K-12 when that same thing
Whenever
happens.
that happens.
That's right. The students become distracted and stop listening to the lesson.
And without me getting too carried away, are you personally capable of doing this, or do you have to have all sorts of technology partners to pull this off?
Since this was supported by Teaching and Learning with Technology, I was so fortunate in having this team of people around me, instructional designers, instructional technologists, people with expertise in educational gaming. I am a music educator, I know teaching, I know music. I don't know the technology side as well. And so that's the benefit of this competition is to have this team created around your work, to fill in the gaps, to push the conversation, to say, what if this? What have you thought about this? And then to actually build it, which is something I could have never done on my own.
So, Jennifer, does this mean that part of this pre-picking who goes up on the stage is whether or not the technology people believe this is something we can do?
That's not part of our vetting process. We're really looking for those emerging.
We're just going all out for innovation
That's
here.
correct.
Wow.
Yes.
You said teaching is not like rocket science, it's harder.
That's
What
correct.
did you mean by that?
That's correct. Well, that's a famous quote by an engineer that had turned into a K-12 teacher. Teaching is complex. We're dealing with human beings. Propulsion systems don't stop working because they just don't feel like it today. But in education, we've got to deal with every individual, every student that comes into our classroom and everything they've experienced in that day and that week. And we've got to be able to provide diverse learning opportunities.
Mm-hmm. So you are transforming a college with the Krause.
Wow, that's very generous of you to say. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to
step
own
back
that.
with it a little bit. So, but one of the things that you've said is that the teacher is a member of the community.
That the way people authentically learn, is when they're engaged in a community of people who are usually trying to solve some kind of problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the things that we need to think about as an institution is how do we transform our classrooms into places that are engaged in real problem solving, not trivial problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, you have to have a community, and the faculty member is an important member of that community because they have a lot of knowledge in the problem solving area. But they also have to see themselves as a facilitator, as somebody who's there to help the students engage with the problem, not necessarily engage with the teacher, which I think we get a little.
So not so far from the sort of traditional "I'm lecturing, you listen"
right
model, and technology is a big part of this.
It can be a big part of it, absolutely. I mean, I think the goal that we want is classrooms that are more authentic, that are more like real practices. So to take Anne's example, because she just did a really nice job explaining it, I think of that as an approximation of practice. It's something that pre-service teachers can engage with that's like the practice that they will eventually do when they leave the class or leave out into the classroom. And so that idea of trying to make our classrooms look more like approximations of the practice that we want. So if they're studying geoscience and they're spending all their time listening to lectures about geology, that's not much of what a geoscientist does. So, and there are aspects of that. There are labs, there are other things that we do that are closer to those approximations of practice. But starting to think about how we design courses to do that. And technology is incredibly important for lots of reasons. I mean, Anne's example is great in that it was a bespoke built technology for that, but there's lots of other ways that technology impacts that.
So can the technology turn out to be a distraction? Should I worry about it if I'm a faculty member where I've got a digital assistant that's helping me, or whether even with augmented reality and other things like that?
Sure.
Where I become, not that I have so much ego that I want people just to be looking at me and paying attention to me, but where it does distract people, or as opposed to maybe because of its novelty?
Yeah, I mean, the novelty is always a double-edged sword, right? I mean, novelty has always been one of the ways that people have used technology to put into schools, right? To say, oh, well, this novelty is going to bring attention. Kids will pay more attention if you give them an iPad instead of just having them read a textbook. And yeah, it can be distracting too, but I think fundamentally that's one of the things that I love about the TLT group here is they take the teaching part of that really seriously. So they, as Jennifer was saying, they're not trying to push technology out. What they're trying to do is improve instruction and practice through supporting it with technology and letting us do things that weren't possible before. So ideally, no, the technology should be as invisible as possible and support the instruction, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be there.
Now, you connected with some very generous alumni.
Yeah.
And now you're heading at the Krause Innovation Studio.
Right.
So what convinced them that this was, they're deeply involved in education themselves. What convinced them that this was going to be really impactful?
That almost is a question for them, but I guess I'll tell you what I think.
Well, if you were good at attracting it, I have the feeling you must have hit a button in there that was a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument I just made was fundamentally the argument that appealed to them, which is that we have to prepare people for a 21st century environment that looks a lot different than it did, and our schools and universities have to reflect that, and some of that excuse me, some of that is the physical space, and that for them was a key, right? Is that we were making an argument for a transformative physical space, and again, that's something that we've been doing. That's a result of my Open Innovation Challenge, and the ongoing partnership with TLT with Jennifer and Kyle is thinking about learning spaces and how technology. I mean, my Open Innovation Challenge was really about. How do we take classrooms that are essentially impersonal because they have to be generalized and make them more personalized and going back to that word authentic, that there's a way that those can feel like a place that group is working in all the time, even though they're only there for a short period.
So I love the idea of thinking about those physical spaces, because I imagine many people, and even many people that are listening, are visualizing their classrooms. And are classrooms all across this university changing?
I hope so. We're working on that. So I think part of what we've done with Scott is to include a research into what these learning spaces have in terms of an impact on the student learning. And what we're finding is that there are affordances of particular learning spaces that students and faculty are demanding more of. They want more flexibility so that it doesn't have to simply be a lecture, right? So rather than bolting seats to the floor, we can do very simple things like put those chairs on casters. We are finding that whiteboard space, and you can call it a chalkboard, you can call it a whiteboard, but it needs to be prevalent throughout the entire room. And it really provides, again, this opportunity for faculty and students to collaborate in really authentic ways, to problem solve in very different ways. And so I think we're seeing a shift not only in the demand for these spaces, so more and more faculty are saying, I want to do something different, so we're going to put these spaces in place so that they can do that. And we're wrapping that with faculty development, so how do you go into these spaces, what goes along with that? How do you change your instruction, so that instructional design piece? What are the technologies and how do they become invisible in this space so that when we walk in, they just work and people can use them without sort of having the barriers? And I think people faculty are understanding why this is critical and why this is important. Does that mean the large lecture hall will go away, Dr. Barron? I don't think so. Certainly not at Penn State, but I think there are, those teach a large number of students, but a small number of courses. And the rest of our courses are really in these classrooms. The far majority of them are in these classrooms that are 40 seats or less. And they're very easy, low impact ways that we can encourage the active learning. But if we design them for lecture, that's what's going to happen.
So I'll just sort of ask this in a way that sounds like I really don't know what I'm talking about. But I'm thinking about Anne and all of these students with, some immersive technology and a mask. And they're all wandering around a classroom, bumping into each other as they visit student and student and student. Surely that can't be the way it is.
It is not. So I'm glad you asked that question. So we started there. So don't think that's a stupid question.
So people were bumping into each other.
We did. So we everybody put on these headsets, and you can imagine that you're all in the same location, but you're in virtually, but you're in different locations within that space. So imagine being on the surface of Mars, and some of you are sort of over here by this interesting glacial piece, or you're over on this side of Mars and you're looking down into a this cavern. But we found people were running into each other. So what we did was created the Immersive Experiences Lab. It's over in our Ag Sciences building, and it's specifically designed for both the consumption and creation of these immersive realities. And so everything, the chairs swivel and they go fully around, so both the seat swivels and the actual chair swivels. There's a little bit of a partition so that you've got a little bit of space, so you're not necessarily
You don't have to worry about bumping into your neighbor.
And there's power that comes up in the center, so the devices that power this, you can easily get power to that. But it's low enough and open enough that you can have a conversation around this. And what's been really fascinating is we've had to develop a new vocabulary about location and space as you're talking to students.
I bet.
They're immersed in a forest, but you have to tell them to look to the right. Well, everybody's in a different location, so how do you identify
How do you look to the right?
Space, right.
Yeah.
Everybody's right is different. And then additionally in that space, so the consumption piece we've, I think, solved pretty easily, but the creation piece is how do you start to create this without actually having to put on the goggles every time you create something. And so we've done something like take a two curved screens and put them together on the wall. And again, the partitions between the seats are low enough that as you're creating, you can look up and see what is this going to look like, and then you can put on the headset and become immersed in this space.
Fascinating. I imagine we're going to have many, many more classrooms like that. The other thing that I hear people talk about, and I heard you talk about it, is digital fluency. That this isn't just, here's your classroom experience. What does that mean if you want your students to be digitally fluent?
So thank you for the question. I think digital fluency, we've been talking about digital literacy for probably 25 years, but what we're talking about now is the move to digital fluency, which is not just the ability to understand how to use the tools, but how do we become creators of new knowledge with those tools. We know that our employers, our future employers, want our students to be critical thinkers, creative problem solvers, excellent communicators. And so by creating opportunities for students to immerse themselves in these technologies, we want to give them as many authentic opportunities, as Scott mentioned, to practice these skills in a safe environment.
Yeah. So not only are we going to enable them to whatever their profession is, teaching in the classroom or anything else, we want them to be so intimately involved in technology that they can be the leaders. Well, I wish we had more time because this is just a lot of fun to think about, but I really do appreciate the fact that the three of you took your time to sit here and discuss such a wonderful topic. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Barron, thank you so much for joining me. Fascinating discussion.
Oh, wonderful discussion.
Yeah, definitely talking about a more authentic classroom, as one of the guests described it as. So when you went to the symposium, what was your first reaction after seeing the various presentations?
You know, I had a lot of different reactions. One of them is, how can we just pick one?
Yeah.
Because there were so many good ideas, and I didn't want any of those ideas to sort of fall off the shelf. I wanted to see all of them. Such creative, thoughtful ways the faculty were thinking about the future. And, you know, it's expensive to innovate. You have to have the resources to be able to. You heard Ann saying that I have the ideas, I have the skill in my profession. Now this is an opportunity to be surrounded by a team of experts. That takes, there are many, many universities I think are just not capable of innovating the way Penn State is doing it right now.
Yeah, we are innovating in a lot of ways. You see that in a whole bunch of our episodes, of course. Yep. And you also talked about this not being a distraction. So how can we go about doing this well? You know, having this traditional style classroom lecture and balancing that with innovative, tech-forward teaching methods.
Yeah, so I trust them, the education professionals, to think through that. But I'm always curious about it, mostly because it's a novelty. I think once people get used to it, but it is sort of a different concept that you're part, as a teacher, you're part of an educational community. You're not the person on the stage. And using technology to do that, I think, is fascinating. There was one pitch that was up there about having a digital assistant. Instead of me I ask a question, and the digital assistant calls someone, make sure they call everybody, keeps track of the answers by my saying, that's a great answer. Check goes there without me going and having to do any of it. So does that become a kind of strange environment for teaching? I'm just not sure. I have the feeling after a while it'll become very natural.
And during this conversation, we heard that there was a student there at the symposium as well. Do you remember that student? If so, can you share a little bit?
No, the student, this year's symposium, a student will be there.
Understood.
So, and we do have a student that is working to create a new company around this with educational tools. And she gives the example of you're sitting in an elementary school classroom and everybody's wearing immersive technology, and the students are seeing the animals they're talking about come into the room. The bear is there, the giraffe is there, as opposed to seeing pictures or having the teacher describe them.
So a lot of students want to innovate. A lot of people have a whole bunch of ideas, but as you said, it is expensive. So what would you say to students who want to innovate, but they're just not sure how to get that first step started?
So, you know, this would have been a good question for me to ask, But a part of this opportunity is this symposium, I think. This sort of signal out there that here's a community and a whole group of interested faculty. Because Jennifer Sparrow helps run an office that does this. So I think this is the entry point for anybody who's interested in this space.
And what other ways could you see Penn State classrooms or research innovating even more? We talked about convergence research, but we also talked about this technology forward initiative that we're doing in many different ways. What other ways could you see Penn State classrooms being more innovative and being even more authentic than what they already are?
Well, I think we touched upon one of them briefly. I think we're going to see the physical plant change rather dramatically in the classroom for a lot of these cases. There's too many times where if you could walk through the space, geology, teaching, whatever, it becomes a very different educational experience. But that means the physical plant has to evolve with it. And I think that'll be one thing, because that's also expensive.
Right. And it was interesting how this wasn't just for strictly science, but it was also for the arts as well, using it in both fields.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dr.
My
Barron.
pleasure. What fun.
Support for Digging Deeper comes from the Penn State Alumni Association, connecting alumni to the university and to each other. The Alumni Association is powered by pride. Learn more at alumni.psu.edu. And from viewers like you, thank you.